I want you to meet someone, Governor. The words hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. Vice President J.D. Vance's voice cut through the CNN studio with surgical precision. Not loud, not aggressive, just certain. The kind of certainty that makes people stop talking and start listening because they know something important is about to happen. Gavin Newsom's smile flickered, just for a fraction of a second, but the cameras caught it. High-definition cameras broadcasting to 43 million viewers across America caught the exact moment when California's governor realized this wasn't going to be the usual political theater. This was something else entirely. Her name is Jennifer. 3 words, 21 letters. And in that moment, Gavin Newsom's carefully constructed political future began to crumble. She's here tonight, in this audience. The studio lights blazed down on the stage at CNN's Los Angeles facility. October 23, 2025. A Thursday evening that would be replayed and analyzed and dissected for years to come. The kind of political moment that becomes a dividing line. There's before and there's after. And nothing is ever quite the same. This wasn't supposed to happen. None of it. The forum had been Newsom's idea originally. Well, his team's idea. A chance to reset the narrative. California was drowning in problems. Homelessness visible on every street corner. Crime statistics climbing despite official denials. An exodus of middle-class families so massive that U-Haul had run out of trucks leaving the state. Businesses fleeing to Texas and Florida like refugees from a war zone. Newsom needed to show he was in control. Show he had answers. Show he cared. CNN had been more than willing to help. They'd framed it as a California crisis forum, tough but fair questions, a chance for the governor to demonstrate leadership under pressure. They'd even invited Vice President Vance to provide a national perspective, bipartisan discourse, productive dialogue, all the buzzwords that sound good in press releases. What they didn't know, what Newsom's team hadn't anticipated, was that J.D. Vance had spent the last 73 days preparing for this moment like a prosecutor preparing for a murder trial. Every folder, every document, every photograph, every statistic, all of it designed for one purpose: to systematically dismantle the mythology of Gavin Newsom. The audience sat in carefully arranged rows. 300 people, Democrats and Republicans, Newsom supporters and critics, undecided voters CNN had recruited from across California. They'd come expecting a debate. They were about to witness an execution. Backstage, 2 hours earlier, the energy couldn't have been more different in the 2 green rooms. Newsom sat in his director's chair, makeup artist touching up his foundation. His suit was navy blue, custom tailored, probably cost more than most Americans make in a month. His hair was perfect. It was always perfect. Political operatives joked that Newsom's hair had higher approval ratings than most senators. Every strand in place. Every angle calculated for maximum impact on camera. Marcus Chen, his communications director, paced the small room with a tablet, running through talking points, final preparations, the routine they'd done 1,000 times before. Remember the narrative. California leads the nation in innovation, in climate action, in progressive values. We're not perfect, but we're trying. Vance is going to attack from the right. Don't take the bait. Stay positive. Talk about the future, not the past. Newsom nodded absently, scrolling through Twitter on his phone, looking at early commentary about tonight's forum. Most political analysts expected this to be standard fare. Newsom defending California's record, Vance attacking it, both sides claiming victory afterward. Nothing new under the sun. Vance is going to come at you on homelessness. Marcus continued. We know that's his opening. You pivot to investment. 24 billion shows commitment. It's a crisis decades in the making. Can't be solved overnight. I've done this 1,000 times. Newsom said without looking up. His voice had that casual confidence of someone who'd never really been challenged. Someone who'd grown up wealthy, connected, privileged. Someone who'd been in politics since his 20s and never lost. Mayor of San Francisco at 36. Lieutenant governor. Governor for 7 years. Every step up had been easy, expected, inevitable, like water flowing downhill. The path of least resistance paved with family money and political connections and the kind of looks that played well on television. Just don't let him rattle you, Marcus said. He's going to try to make it personal. Stay above it. 3 floors up in a different green room, J.D. Vance sat at a table completely covered with manila folders. Color-coded tabs stuck out like flags on a battlefield. Red for homelessness, blue for economy, green for crime, yellow for hypocrisy. Each folder thick with documents, printouts, highlighted passages, annotated notes in the margins. This wasn't debate prep. This was a prosecution. Sarah Martinez, his senior advisor, stood at a whiteboard that had been brought in specifically for this meeting. On it was a timeline, 2 hours broken into segments. Each segment had a topic and an objective written in black marker. First 20 minutes established the failures. Sarah said, pointing to the timeline. Homelessness up 40% despite $24 billion spent. Housing costs through the roof. Middle-class exodus. You're not arguing policy preferences. You're documenting objective failure. Vance nodded, flipping through the red folder. Inside were charts, statistics, photographs that told stories no amount of spin could erase. A tent encampment 2 blocks from the state capitol. A graph showing homelessness trends over 7 years. A breakdown of where the $24 billion actually went. Consultants, environmental studies, bureaucracy. Less than 20% actually building housing. 20 to 40 minutes the business exodus. Sarah continued. Oracle, Tesla, Hewlett-Packard, 13,000 businesses left in 3 years. Not random, not coincidence. Policy-driven. High taxes, overregulation, hostile environment. The blue folder had corporate press releases. CEOs explaining why they were leaving in their own words. Tax burden comparisons. Regulatory compliance cost analyses. Business climate rankings that put California dead last among all 50 states. 40 to 60 minutes crime and quality of life. Sarah went on. Proposition 47 effectively legalizing theft. Videos of smash and grab robberies. Store closures. He'll say crime is down. You show it's only down because they changed how they count it. The green folder had video links. News articles. Police reports. Evidence that couldn't be spun away or explained away or wished away. 60 to 90 minutes the hypocrisy. Sarah said, tapping the yellow section on the board. This is where you destroy his credibility. French laundry dinner during lockdown. Private jets while lecturing about climate. Kids in private school while opposing school choice. Living in a bubble while claiming to represent working people. Vance opened the yellow folder. Photos of Newsom at high-end restaurants. Flight manifests showing private jet usage. His kids' school tuition records. $40,000 per child per year. His house purchase records. $4 million in Pacific Heights. And then Jennifer. Sarah said quietly, 90 minutes in, when he's already wounded, when his talking points are exhausted, when he's defensive, that's when we make it human. That's when we show what all these failures actually mean. Vance looked at a photo of Jennifer taken just last week. She was sitting on a sidewalk, her few possessions in a backpack beside her. She looked tired, used up, forgotten. The kind of person most people walk past without seeing, without really seeing. She's ready, Vance asked. She's ready. She knows her story, knows the dates, can prove she was there when she says she was. We've checked everything. It's airtight. Vance closed the folder, sat back in his chair, let out a long breath. Newsom thinks this is going to be a normal political debate where we disagree about policy direction. He thinks he can smile and use his talking points and walk out looking gubernatorial. He looked at Sarah, held her gaze. We're going to make him defend the indefensible. And we're going to do it with his own record. Nothing out of context, nothing twisted, just facts, just reality. Let him try to spin his way out of reality. At 5 o'clock Pacific time, both men were led to the stage. The CNN studio audience was filling in. About 300 people carefully balanced. Some Newsom supporters wearing blue, some critics, some undecided voters CNN had recruited for authenticity. The lights were bright, professional, the kind of lights that reveal every bead of sweat, every nervous tick, every moment of uncertainty. Dana Bash reviewed her notes at the moderator's podium. She'd done this dozens of times, moderated debates in forums and town halls. She knew how these things went: structured questions, timed responses, maybe some tension but ultimately predictable. Politicians doing what politicians do: spinning, deflecting, claiming victory. She had no idea what was about to happen. Backstage, the two men waited in opposite wings. Newsom was joking with his staff, relaxed, confident. Vance was quiet, reviewing his notes one final time, mentally preparing for what he was about to do. At 5:15, they walked onto the stage. Newsom with his practiced smile and waved to the audience. The kind of smile he'd perfected over years of campaigning. Friendly but not too friendly, confident but not arrogant. The smile that tested well in focus groups. Vance with a serious nod. Businesslike, direct, no performance, no show, just a man with a job to do. They shook hands for the cameras. Newsom's grip firm and practiced, Vance's businesslike and brief. Then they took their positions at podiums about 15 feet apart, close enough to see each other clearly, far enough to maintain professional distance. Dana Bash welcomed the television audience, explained the format: 2 hours, mix of direct exchanges and audience questions, topics ranging from homelessness to crime to economy to quality of life. She emphasized that this was meant to be substantive, civil, focused on solutions. That lasted about 10 minutes. "We'll begin with opening statements," Dana said. "Governor Newsom, you have 3 minutes." Newsom stood from his stool. He always preferred to stand for important moments. Made him look taller, more commanding, more presidential. "Thank you, Dana. Thank you to CNN. And thank you to everyone watching tonight." His voice was smooth, practiced. The voice of a man who'd given speeches to thousands of people, who'd done hundreds of television interviews, who knew exactly how to modulate his tone for maximum impact. "Look, I'm not going to stand here and tell you California is perfect. No state is. We face real challenges, challenges that affect real people every single day." He paused, let that hang in the air, then continued. "But I want Americans to understand something. California isn't failing. California is leading." He hit his rhythm now, the cadence he'd perfected over years of public speaking, the rhythm that made people want to believe him even when the evidence suggested otherwise. "We have the 5th largest economy in the world, larger than India, larger than the United Kingdom. We're home to the most innovative companies on Earth. The technology that powers your phones, your computers, your cars, it comes from California." He gestured now, open hands, inclusive body language. "Google, Apple, Tesla started here. The entertainment you watch, the food you eat. California produces more agriculture than any other state. Warming up now, getting into it. We've led the nation on climate change, on civil rights, on workers' protections, on healthcare access. When Washington was paralyzed by partisan gridlock, California acted. We've invested unprecedented resources in solving our challenges. $24 billion on homelessness. That shows commitment. That shows we're serious." He looked directly into the camera, the move his media coaches had drilled into him: make eye contact with the viewer at home, make them feel seen. "Yes, we have a homelessness crisis. It's real, it's visible, it breaks my heart every day. But this is a crisis that took decades to develop. It can't be solved overnight. It requires sustained investment, compassion, and evidence-based solutions. That's what we're doing." He paused for effect, letting the moment breathe. "I believe in California. I believe in its people. I believe in its values. I believe we're showing America what's possible when you have the courage to tackle big problems with big solutions, when you put people over politics, when you lead with your values instead of following the polls." A final gesture, open-handed, sincere-looking. "That's what tonight should be about. Not tearing down, not playing political games, but having an honest conversation about how we build a better future for California, for America, for all of us." Scattered applause from the left side of the audience. Newsom sat back on his stool looking satisfied. He'd hit all his marks, set the tone he wanted, positioned himself as the optimistic leader with a vision. Dana Bash nodded. "Vice President Vance, your opening statement." Vance stood slowly. No theatrical movements, no practiced gestures, just stood and looked across at Newsom with an expression that was hard to read. Not angry, not smug, just serious. Like a lawyer about to present evidence in a case he knew he'd win. "Governor Newsom, I appreciate your optimism, I really do. Optimism is good, hope is good." He paused, let that settle, then continued with a different tone. Harder, more direct. "But let's talk about reality. Not talking points, not spin, reality." His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. The Appalachian accent was subtle but present. This wasn't a slick coastal politician. This was someone who'd grown up in a different world, who'd seen what happened when industries collapsed and communities died. "You said California's economy is the 5th largest in the world. That's true." Another pause. "It's also true that in the past 3 years, California lost 800,000 residents. Net. More people leaving than arriving. For the first time in California's 170-year history." He let that number hang in the air. 800,000, the population of a major city, gone. People don't leave success stories, Governor. They leave failures. He pulled a small note card from his jacket pocket, glanced at it, then back at Newsom. "You said you've invested $24 billion in homelessness." Also true. It's also true that during your time as governor, homelessness in California increased by 40%. You spent $24 billion and made the problem worse. That's not investment. That's waste. He glanced at the card again, then back at Newsom. "You talked about California leading on climate change. You also took 41 private jet flights last year. Your carbon footprint from just those flights is more than what 50 average Californians produce in a year. You lecture people about driving SUVs while you fly private everywhere. That's not leadership. That's hypocrisy." Newsom was shaking his head, but Vance kept going. Methodical, relentless. "You mentioned California's innovation economy. You didn't mention that Tesla moved its headquarters to Texas, or that Oracle moved to Texas, or that Hewlett-Packard moved to Texas, or that 13,000 businesses have left California in the past 3 years." He paused, let those numbers sink in. "Why are the companies you're so proud of leaving?" He put the note card away, looked directly at Newsom. "You said you believe in California's values. So do I. California should be the greatest state in America. Perfect weather, natural beauty, innovative people, natural resources. It has everything going for it. Everything except competent governance." His voice got quieter, more intense. The kind of quiet that makes people lean forward to hear better. "You've been governor for 7 years. You've had a Democratic supermajority in the legislature, massive budgets, no meaningful opposition. You've had unlimited power to implement your vision." He paused, let that reality settle over the audience. "And what's happened? Housing costs up 50%, gas prices highest in the nation, crime surging, schools failing, middle class fleeing, homelessness exploding." Another pause, longer this time. "At some point, Governor, you have to stop blaming everyone else and look in the mirror. You've had every advantage, every resource, every opportunity, and you've failed. Not in the ways that politicians usually fail, getting outmaneuvered, losing votes, having to compromise. You failed in the most basic way possible, making things worse instead of better." He turned to face the audience now, speaking to them instead of to Newsom. "Tonight I'm going to walk through California's failures in detail. Not because I want to tear down California. I love California. My wife and I got married there. But because the people of California deserve accountability. They deserve to know where their money went, why their lives got harder, why the promises didn't match reality." Back to Newsom, direct eye contact. "You've had your chance, Governor. 7 years, it didn't work. Maybe it's time to admit that and try something different." Dead silence in the audience. No applause, no reaction, just the weight of what had been said hanging in the air like smoke after an explosion. Dana Bash looked between them. She'd moderated dozens of these events. She could feel this was different. The energy in the room had shifted. This wasn't going to be the usual political theater. Let's begin with our first topic, homelessness and housing. This is clearly the most visible crisis in California. Governor Newsom, you mentioned the $24 billion. Walk us through what that money has accomplished. And with that question, the real debate began. Not the theatrical opening statements, but the detailed examination of failure. Round by round, topic by topic, each one building on the last. Each one making it harder for Newsom to maintain his narrative. This wasn't going to be a draw where both sides claimed victory. This was going to be a demolition, piece by piece, claim by claim, until there was nothing left but the gap between rhetoric and reality. Newsom stood from his stool, ready for this topic. He'd known it was coming. His team had prepared him, had the talking points ready. Look, the $24 billion represents the most comprehensive investment in addressing homelessness that any state has ever made. We're building housing. We're providing services. We're taking a holistic approach. How many housing units have you built? Vance interrupted, not rudely, just factually, like a prosecutor asking a question he already knew the answer to. We've built thousands of units of permanent supportive housing. How many thousands specifically? Newsom hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. I don't have the exact number at my fingertips. I do. Vance pulled out his first folder, read tab, opened it with practiced ease. In the 7 years you've been governor, California has built approximately 18,000 units of permanent supportive housing specifically for homeless individuals. 18,000 units. He pulled out a document, held it up so the audience could see. That sounds good until you do the math. $24 billion divided by 18,000 units equals $1.3 million per unit. He let that number hang in the air, repeated it for emphasis. Per unit, Governor. You spent more than $1 million per apartment to house homeless people. The audience stirred. That number didn't sound right. It couldn't be right. But the document in Vance's hand said otherwise. Vance continued, voice steady, facts clicking into place like pieces of a puzzle. For context, the median home price in California is $800,000. You could have bought every homeless person in California an actual house for less than what you spent per supportive housing unit. How is that possible? Newsom was already going defensive. You could see it in his posture, in the set of his jaw. Housing production involves complex factors, construction costs, environmental review, land acquisition. Let's talk about that. Vance pulled out another document, this one with highlighted sections, yellow marker. Someone had spent time on this. This is a case study from the Los Angeles Times. A supportive housing project in downtown LA. 80 units. Want to know how much they spent on environmental impact reports before breaking ground? He didn't wait for an answer, didn't need to. $4.2 million on environmental reports for a building in downtown Los Angeles that was going on a parking lot. $4.2 million in consultant fees, studies, bureaucratic process, before a single homeless person got housed. He pulled out more papers. The folder seemed bottomless. The San Francisco Chronicle did an investigation last year. They found that in San Francisco, the average cost of building one unit of supportive housing is $750,000 in construction costs alone. Why? Because of permit fees, impact fees, union requirements, prevailing wage laws, environmental mandates. You've created a system where it costs $750,000 to build one apartment. Newsom tried to respond, tried to regain control of the narrative. We have important protections in place. Important protections that make housing homeless people impossibly expensive. Vance's voice had an edge now, sharp but controlled. Do you know what it costs to build an apartment in Houston? $90,000. In Nashville, $120,000. In Dallas, $140,000. You're spending 5 to 6 times more than other cities to build the exact same thing. That's not protection. That's waste. And Vance was just getting started. He'd only opened the first folder. There were 4 more on the table behind him. And that's just the money that actually went to housing. Want to know where the rest went? He pulled out a pie chart, full color, professional graphics, held it up like evidence in a trial. This is from the California State Auditor's report on homelessness spending. Of the $24 billion, only 37% went to actual housing construction or rental assistance. 37%. He pointed to sections of the chart as he spoke. Where did the other $15 billion go? Administration. $5 billion. Consultants and studies. $3 billion. Services and programs, meaning salaries for case workers, counselors, coordinators. $4 billion. Facilities and infrastructure, meaning offices for the people running the programs. $2 billion. Unaccounted or unspecified. $1 billion. He looked up at Newsom. Direct eye contact, unwavering. You've created a homelessness industrial complex. Thousands of people employed in nonprofits, government agencies, consulting firms, all making good salaries managing the homelessness crisis. But the actual homeless population keeps growing because the system isn't designed to solve homelessness. It's designed to manage it, to sustain itself, to keep the grant money flowing. The audience was completely silent now. These weren't partisan talking points. These were numbers, facts, documentation, the kind of evidence that's hard to argue with. Newsom's face was flushed. You could see the makeup struggling to cover it. That's a gross oversimplification. Is it? Vance pulled out a newspaper article, unfolded it, read from it. This is from the San Francisco Chronicle last year. They profiled a nonprofit called Home First Solutions. The executive director makes $340,000 a year. His top 5 staffers each make over $200,000. The organization manages 3 supportive housing facilities with a total of 200 beds. He looked up from the article. 7 administrators making a combined $1.5 million to manage 200 beds. That's $7,500 in administrative salary per homeless person housed. Does that sound like efficient use of taxpayer money? He didn't wait for an answer, kept going, momentum building. The California Homeless Services Authority, a state agency you created, has 137 employees. Average salary $110,000. Total payroll $15 million a year. How many homeless people do they directly house? 0. They're administrators, coordinating, managing, studying, while people sleep on the streets. Vance looked at the audience now, speaking to them, making them understand. This is what happens when government throws money at a problem without accountability, without results-based metrics. The money gets absorbed by bureaucracy and well-meaning but ineffective programs, and the problem gets worse. Back to Newsom, the moment of truth. You've been governor for 7 years. Homelessness has increased 40%. You've spent more money than most countries' entire GDP, and it got worse. At what point do you admit the approach isn't working? Newsom tried to pivot, tried to change the subject. The classic political move when you're losing. Housing and homelessness are complex multi-generational issues. Let's talk about something simple then. Vance cut him off, smooth, practiced, like he'd anticipated this exact response. Let's talk about November 6, 2020. Where were you that night? Newsom's face tightened. He knew exactly where this was going. Everyone watching knew where this was going. The French Laundry, the scandal that had damaged him before. But Vance wasn't done with it, not even close. I don't recall specific dates from years ago. Let me refresh your memory. Vance pulled out photographs, multiple photographs, spread them on his podium. November 6, 2020. You were at the French Laundry restaurant in Napa Valley, 3 Michelin stars, one of the most expensive restaurants in America. You were there for a birthday party. The photographs appeared on the monitors around the audience. Clear images, high resolution, Newsom at a fancy restaurant, laughing, glass of wine in hand, surrounded by people. No masks, no distancing. Want to know what's interesting about November 6, 2020? Vance's voice was calm, but cutting, like a surgeon making an incision. That was during your strictest lockdown. You had banned indoor dining across all of California, completely banned. Restaurants couldn't serve people inside. Thousands of restaurants were going bankrupt. Owners were losing everything they'd worked for. He paused, let that sink in, then continued. You also told Californians not to gather with people outside their households. No birthday parties. No family dinners. You specifically said, and I have the clip, that gathering for holidays or celebrations was too dangerous. Remember that. Newsom opened his mouth, but Vance kept going. Didn't give him space to respond. So while you were telling restaurant owners they couldn't serve customers, while you were telling families they couldn't have Thanksgiving dinner together, while you were destroying people's livelihoods and mental health with your lockdown orders, you were at a fancy restaurant, inside, maskless, with 11 other people, celebrating. He pulled out a receipt, actual receipt, evidence. Want to know what that dinner cost? The table's bill was $15,400, including wine pairings. $15,000, while restaurant owners across California were filing for bankruptcy because you wouldn't let them operate. The audience was murmuring now, some people looking disgusted, others shaking their heads, the energy in the room shifting, turning against Newsom. And who paid for that dinner? Vance asked, voice sharp now accusatory. Who picked up the $15,000 tab while you were deciding which California businesses could survive and which had to die? He pulled out another document, more evidence, more facts. The California Medical Association, a lobbying group. They paid for your dinner. You were there with their lobbyists, making decisions about their issues, while they bought you $15,000 worth of food and wine. Newsom tried to respond, tried to defend himself. I've apologized for that dinner multiple times. You apologized for getting caught. Vance's voice was harsh now, no pretense of politeness. Let's be clear about what happened. Someone leaked photos. The story broke. You went on TV and said you made a mistake, but the mistake wasn't the lockdowns. The mistake wasn't the hypocrisy. The mistake was not being more careful about being photographed. His voice got harder, more intense. 2 weeks after that dinner, 2 weeks, you signed legislation favorable to the California Medical Association, legislation they'd been lobbying for. Coincidence? I've never let personal relationships influence policy decisions. You took a $15,000 dinner from lobbyists and then signed their bill. That's not a personal relationship. That's corruption. Legal corruption maybe, but corruption. Vance turned to the camera, to the millions watching at home. This is what bothers people. Not that politicians are imperfect, but the complete lack of self-awareness. You shut down restaurants, destroyed businesses, told families they couldn't see each other for Thanksgiving. Then you went to the fanciest restaurant in the state for a $15,000 lobbyist dinner, and you thought that was okay. Back to Newsom, direct, unrelenting. You didn't think about the restaurant owner who just filed for bankruptcy. You didn't think about the family who couldn't visit their elderly parents for the holidays. You didn't think about the workers who'd been laid off because of your orders. You thought about yourself, your friends, your lobbyists, because rules are for other people, not for you. Before Newsom could recover, before he could mount any kind of defense, Vance moved to the next attack. Seamless, practiced, like a boxer working combinations. Let's talk about climate change. You've positioned yourself as a climate leader. You want to ban gas cars by 2035. You've passed aggressive emissions targets. You lecture people constantly about their carbon footprint. Climate change is an existential threat, you say. He paused, then delivered the punch. Then why did you take 41 private jet flights last year? Vance pulled out flight manifests, real documents, real evidence. 41 private flights. I have the records, tail numbers, departure and arrival times, destinations, all of them. He started reading, voice steady, methodical, each flight account in the indictment. January 15, 2024. Sacramento to Los Angeles, 1 hour flight, private jet. There are commercial flights every hour. You chose private. January 22nd. Los Angeles to San Francisco, 45-minute flight, private jet. Again, commercial flights constantly available. February 8th. Sacramento to San Diego, private jet. He looked up from the manifest. made eye contact with Newsom. You flew private from Sacramento to San Diego. That's a 6-hour drive or a 1-hour commercial flight. You took a private jet. He didn't wait for a response, kept building the case. Want to guess the carbon emissions from a private jet flight versus commercial? A private jet uses about 5 to 7 times more fuel per passenger than a commercial flight. Your carbon footprint from just your jet flights last year was approximately 200 tons of CO2. The average American produces about 16 tons per year. Your private jet habit alone produced as much carbon as 12 average Americans produce in an entire year. The math was damning, simple, undeniable, the kind of numbers that cut through spin and excuses. Newsom tried to deflect, tried to explain. Security requirements and time constraints necessitate. Security requirements. Vance's voice dripped with skepticism, with contempt. You're a governor, not the president. You don't need private jets for security. You want them for convenience, for luxury, because you can. He pulled out more records, more evidence. The folders seemed endless. My favorite is June 2024. You flew private from Sacramento to San Francisco to speak at a climate conference. A climate conference, Governor, about reducing emissions. You flew private 90 miles to tell people they need to reduce their carbon footprint. Audience laughter, uncomfortable laughter, but laughter nonetheless. The absurdity was too much. The jet fuel you burned getting to that conference produced more emissions than 50 Californians commuting to work for a month. Do you see the irony? Do you see why people think you're full of it? Newsom's voice rose, getting defensive now, losing composure. This is cherry-picking isolated incidents. 41 flights in 1 year isn't isolated. It's a pattern. It's a lifestyle. Vance's voice was hard now, accusatory, building to something. You live in luxury while demanding sacrifice from everyone else. You fly private while telling middle-class families they need to buy $60,000 electric cars they can't afford. You produce the carbon footprint of 12 people while lecturing everyone else about using too much energy. He pulled out a photo, color photo, crystal clear. This is you getting off a private jet in Los Angeles. August 2024. You were going to a fundraiser. You could have flown commercial. You could have driven 6 hours, but you took a private jet because your time is valuable. Your comfort matters, but everyone else, they can take the bus. And before Newsom could respond, before he could mount any defense, Vance shifted gears again, not giving him any time to recover, not giving him any space to breathe. Let's talk about education. You're a big supporter of public schools, right? You've fought against school choice. You've opposed voucher programs. You say every child deserves a quality public education. I believe strongly in public education. Where do your kids go to school? Silence, long, painful silence. The kind of silence that tells you everything. Governor, where do your 4 children attend school? Newsom's voice was tight, strained, like the words were being pulled from him against his will. That's a personal family matter. It's a public matter when you're making education policy. Where do they go? More silence, then finally. They attend a private school in Marin County. Thank you for your honesty. Vance's voice was almost gentle now, but the gentleness was more cutting than anger would have been. And how much does that private school cost per year? I don't see how that's relevant. How much, Governor? Newsom looked at his communications director in the front row, looked at Dana Bash, looked anywhere but at Vance. Finally, defeated. Approximately $40,000 per child. $40,000. Vance repeated it, let it hang in the air. You have 4 children. That's $160,000 per year in private school tuition. More than the average California teacher makes in a year. You're spending more on private school than most families make in total income. He pulled out California education statistics. More documents, more evidence. California ranks 37th in the nation for reading proficiency, 40th in math proficiency. Your public schools are failing. You know they're failing. That's why your kids don't go there. Newsom tried to interrupt, but Vance raised his voice slightly. Not much, just enough. You oppose school choice programs that would give poor families vouchers to send their kids to private schools. You vetoed school choice bills. You fought against charter schools. Why? Because teachers' unions donate millions to your campaigns, so you protect their monopoly on failing schools. He looked directly at Newsom, unwavering. But your kids don't suffer. They go to a $40,000 a year school with small class sizes, experienced teachers, excellent facilities. They'll be fine. It's other people's kids who are trapped in failing schools, other people's kids who can't read at grade level, other people's kids whose futures are being destroyed by the system you protect. That's not fair. Newsom started, but the words sounded weak even as he said them. You keep saying that. Vance's voice was cutting now, sharp. What's not fair is that you have choices, and you deny those same choices to families who need them more than you do. What's not fair is spending $160,000 a year on private school while fighting against giving a poor family in Oakland a $10,000 voucher. He pulled out testimonials, parent stories, real people affected by these policies. I talked to parents in South LA. Their kids are stuck in schools where 30% of students can't read at grade level. Those parents want the same choice you made. They want to send their kids somewhere better. You won't let them because protecting the teachers' union matters more than protecting children. The accusations kept coming, each one hitting harder than the last, each one backed by evidence, by facts, by the reality that no amount of spin could erase. Let's talk about the people leaving California, Vance said, pulling out yet another folder, this one thicker than the others. In the past 3 years, California lost a net 800,000 residents, not people moving within California, people leaving the state entirely. Why? Newsom tried his prepared answer, the one Marcus had drilled into him backstage. Population fluctuations are normal. People move for various reasons. 800,000 people. That's not fluctuation, that's exodus. Vance's voice was hard, unforgiving. And it's not random. Let's talk about who's leaving. He pulled out demographic data, charts showing the trends. Middle-class families, young professionals, small business owners, retirees, the people who built California, the people who made it work. They're leaving. And you know who's replacing them. The very wealthy who can afford California's costs, and the very poor who qualify for California's services. The middle is being hollowed out. He showed charts on the monitors, professional graphics, clear data. Median income families, people making between $50,000 and $150,000 a year, are leaving California at twice the rate of other income groups. Why? Because they can't afford to live there anymore. He ticked off the reasons, each one a nail in the coffin. Housing costs up 50% in 7 years. Gas prices highest in the nation. Electricity rates second highest. Car insurance most expensive. Grocery costs 30% above national average. Tax burden highest in the nation. He looked at Newsom, direct, accusing. You've created a state where if you're a billionaire, it's fine. If you're poor, you get benefits. But if you're middle class trying to raise a family, you're being crushed. Newsom tried to respond, tried to defend his record. We're making investments in affordability. You've been making those investments for 7 years. It's gotten worse, not better. How long before you admit your investments aren't working? Vance pulled out corporate press releases, more evidence, more proof. Oracle moved its headquarters to Texas. Announced in December 2020. Why'd they leave? CEO Larry Ellison said, and I quote, California's business climate has become untenable. The regulations, the taxes, the costs make it impossible to grow. He continued reading, one company after another. Tesla, Elon Musk moved the headquarters to Texas in 2021, said California had become complacent and entitled. Hewlett-Packard, founded in California in 1939, moved to Texas in 2020. He looked up from the papers. These aren't startups. These are iconic California companies that gave up on California. More names, more companies. The list seemed endless. In the past 3 years, 13,000 businesses have left California or closed. 13,000. Not locations. Entire businesses, taking hundreds of thousands of jobs with them. He pulled out tax comparisons. More data, more evidence. You want to know why? I'll tell you why. The Tax Foundation ranks California dead last. 50th out of 50 states for business tax climate. Dead last. The top marginal income tax rate is 13.3%, highest in the nation. Corporate tax rate 9.6%. Add federal taxes and successful businesses in California are paying over 50% of their income in taxes. But it's not just taxes, it's regulations. His voice was passionate now, building to something. California has more regulations than any other state. Environmental regulations, labor regulations, safety regulations, building codes, permitting requirements. It takes an average of 7 years to get approval to build an apartment building in San Francisco. 7 years. In Texas, it takes 18 months. He looked at Newsom, made sure everyone understood. You've made it impossibly expensive and impossibly complicated to do business in California. So businesses leave, and then you act surprised and blame Republicans or corporations or whoever. But it's your policies, your decisions, your governance. Crime, Vance said, pulling out his last major folder. Green tab, thick with documentation. You've said repeatedly that crime in California is down, that your criminal justice reforms are working. Is that true? Newsom jumped on this, eager to defend something, anything. Overall crime statistics show that California's crime rate is below the national average. Because you changed how you count crime. Vance's voice was sharp, cutting through the spin like a knife. Proposition 47, passed in 2014, made theft under $950 a misdemeanor instead of a felony. And you know what happened? Stores stopped reporting thefts under $950 because nothing happens. No arrests. No prosecution. So it doesn't show up in your statistics. But the crime is very, very real. He pulled out his phone, connected it to the monitors. I'm going to show you some videos. These are all from the past year, all from California. The first video played, a Walgreens in San Francisco, a man calmly walking down the aisles, filling a large garbage bag with products, shampoo, toothpaste, deodorant, razors. A security guard watched him, did nothing. The man walked out with a full bag. That security guard isn't allowed to stop him. Company policy. Because it's not worth the liability. The police won't come. The DA won't prosecute. So thieves just walk in and take whatever they want. Another video, a group of people with hammers, smashing jewelry store display cases, grabbing merchandise, running out to waiting cars. Smash and grab robberies up 700% in Los Angeles County. 700%. But they don't always show up in your statistics because stores have stopped reporting them. More videos. People running out of stores with armfuls of clothes. Shoplifters filling shopping carts and pushing them right out the door. Store employees just watching. Helpless. Walgreens has closed 17 stores in San Francisco because of theft. CVS closed 12. Target closed 3 major stores. Not because they're not profitable, because they can't control the theft. The losses are too high. Vance looked up from his phone, made eye contact with Newsom. You've made theft effectively legal, and you're surprised people are stealing. Newsom was shaking his head vigorously, desperate now. Those are isolated incidents being amplified by conservative media. There are thousands of these videos online, thousands, posted by the thieves themselves. They post them on TikTok and Instagram because they know nothing will happen. They're bragging about it. He pulled out crime statistics, FBI data, official numbers. But let's talk about violent crime. The crime you can't just not report. Murders in Los Angeles up 32% since 2019. Carjackings up 84%. Aggravated assault up 41%. These are FBI statistics, not media spin. Real numbers. More statistics, more evidence building the case. Property crime in San Francisco up 56%. Burglary up 49%. Motor vehicle theft up 71%. But you stand there and say crime is down because you've changed the definitions and stopped counting things. Vance's voice rose, passionate, angry even. People don't feel safe in California cities anymore. They see the videos, they read the news, they know people who have been victimized. You can manipulate statistics all you want. You can claim crime is down, but people living in LA, San Francisco, Oakland, Sacramento, they know better. They see it every day. He paused, let that settle, then delivered the final blow of this section. This is what happens when you prioritize criminals over victims, when you focus on root causes instead of actual justice, when you let people out without bail and refuse to prosecute crimes. You've created an environment where crime is tolerated, even encouraged, and law-abiding citizens suffer. 2 hours. That's how long they'd been at this. 2 hours of systematic demolition, of evidence presented and spin destroyed, of the gap between rhetoric and reality exposed for 40 million people to see. Newsom was visibly struggling now, his perfect hair slightly disheveled, his makeup wearing thin, his confidence completely shattered. He tried every defense, every pivot, every talking point, and Vance had been ready for all of it. But Vance wasn't done. He'd saved the most devastating part for last. "Governor," his voice got quieter, more serious, the kind of quiet that makes everyone stop and listen. "We've talked for 2 hours about policy failures, about statistics, about programs that don't work and money that got wasted, about the gap between your rhetoric and your reality, about your hypocrisy." He paused, let that hang in the air. "But I want to end with something more important than statistics. I want to talk about the human cost of your failures, the real people whose lives have been made worse by your policies." He nodded toward the audience, toward row 7 specifically. "There's someone here tonight who has a story to tell, and I think you should hear it. Governor, I want you to meet someone." The words that started this. The words that would end Newsom's political career. "Her name is Jennifer. She's in the audience tonight." And Jennifer stood up, slowly, carefully, like someone who'd been sitting on concrete too long, like someone whose body hurt from sleeping in doorways, from being beaten, from surviving when the system designed to help her had failed completely. The camera found her. Row 7, left side of the audience. A woman in her early 50s, thin in a way that spoke of missed meals rather than yoga studios, wearing clothes that were clean but worn, her face lined with exhaustion, the kind of exhaustion that comes from never feeling safe, from years of struggle just to survive. She stood slowly, her hands trembling slightly. Dana Bash looked confused. This wasn't in the agreed-upon format. They were supposed to be wrapping up, but she didn't stop it. Nobody stopped it, because everyone in that hall could feel it. Something real was about to break through all the political posturing. "Governor Newsom." Jennifer's voice was quiet at first, shaking, but the microphones caught every syllable. "You don't know me, but I know you." Newsom's face had already arranged itself into his empathy expression. The slight head tilt, the concerned eyes, the softened voice, the look he'd practiced 1,000 times for town halls and photo ops with constituents in crisis. "I'm so sorry to hear about your situation." His voice was smooth, practiced, the kind of sympathy that sounds good on camera but rings hollow in person. "I used to live 3 blocks from your house in San Francisco." Jennifer's voice got stronger, cutting through his practiced sympathy like it wasn't even there. "Pacific Heights, beautiful neighborhood." Newsom's expression flickered, just for a second, the practiced empathy cracking around the edges. "I was a teacher, 5th grade. Monroe Elementary in the Sunset District. I taught for 17 years. I loved those kids. I loved my job." Her voice was clear now, steady, each word landing with weight. "When COVID hit in 2020, I got furloughed. Budget cuts. Then in 2021, they laid me off permanently. I couldn't pay my rent on unemployment benefits. By 2022, I lost my apartment. I ended up on the streets." The hall was completely silent now. You could hear the air conditioning humming through the vents, could hear someone's phone buzz on silent mode, could hear Newsom swallow hard. Jennifer kept going, her voice steady now, clear, each word landing like a hammer. "I've been homeless in San Francisco for 3.5 years. 3.5 years, Governor, while you've been in office. She paused, let that sink in, then continued. I've tried to get help. I've gone to the shelters. They're full, dangerous, or both. I've called the hotlines you set up. I've filled out applications for housing assistance. They tell me there are waiting lists. 2 years long, 3 years long. They tell me to keep checking back. Her voice cracked slightly, but she pushed through. Meanwhile, I sleep in doorways. I've been beaten up twice. Had my backpack stolen 4 times. Everything I owned. Last winter, I almost died from pneumonia. She paused, let that sink in, then looked directly at Newsom with eyes that had nothing left to lose. And you walked past me twice. The silence that followed felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I wasn't invisible, you saw me. Newsom opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His practiced expressions had all disappeared. He just looked stunned, trapped. I was sleeping in a doorway on your street. Your actual street, Governor, Pacific Heights, Filbert Street. This was last year, November, evening time around 7. Her voice was clear now, precise, like she'd rehearsed this, or like the memory was burned so deep she could never forget it. You were coming out of your house. You were dressed up, expensive-looking suit. You were talking on your phone. You walked right past me. You looked down at me for maybe 1 second. We made eye contact, and then you stepped around me and kept walking. The audience was frozen. Some people had tears in their eyes. Others looked angry. Everyone was staring at Newsom. Jennifer wasn't done. Her voice got even stronger. The second time was 2 weeks later. I saw you getting out of a car near a restaurant in Napa, the French Laundry. I'd taken the bus up there. Someone told me there was a shelter with openings. There wasn't. I was sitting on the sidewalk about half a block from the restaurant. She paused, gathering strength. You walked past me with a group of people, all dressed up, laughing. You glanced at me and kept walking. You went inside that restaurant, and I slept outside on the street that night. Her voice cracked, but she pushed through. Do you know what that dinner cost? I looked it up later. $350 per person. You were with a group of maybe 8 people. That's almost $3,000 for one dinner, while I was sitting outside trying to figure out where I could sleep safely. The audience was completely frozen. Some people had tears in their eyes. Others looked angry. Everyone was staring at Newsom. Vance let the moment breathe. Let Jennifer's words hang in the air, settle over the audience like fallout. Then he spoke, his voice quiet but clear. Jennifer is one of 181,000 homeless people in California. That's 30% of all homeless people in the entire United States. In one state. He paused, let that number sink in. You've been governor for 7 years. You've spent, and I want everyone to hear this number, you've spent $24 billion on homelessness programs. $24 billion with a B. Another pause. That's approximately $130,000 per homeless person. For that amount of money, you could have literally bought each homeless person in California a house in most American cities. Instead, Jennifer sleeps in doorways, and you walk past her on your way to $300 dinners. He turned to face Newsom directly. She's not a statistic, Governor. She's not a budget line item. She's a human being. A teacher who devoted 17 years to educating California's children, and your government failed her. Your programs failed her. Your $24 billion failed her. His voice got harder. But more than that, you personally failed her. You saw her. You looked her in the eye, and you walked past her twice. The silence stretched out. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds. The longest silence in modern political television. Finally, Newsom spoke. His voice had lost its smooth confidence. It came out defensive, strained. This is ambush politics, using vulnerable people as political props. She's not a prop. Vance's voice cut through, sharp now, angry. She's your constituent. She lives in your state. She's been trying to get help from your programs for 3 years. She has every right to be here, every right to ask you why you walked past her. Newsom turned toward Jennifer, his face flushed, desperate. I'm deeply sorry for what you've been through, but I can't be expected to personally recognize and solve every individual person's situation. The words hung in the air, and everyone watching knew he just made a fatal mistake. Vance didn't even need to respond. The audience did it for him. Gasps, a few boos, someone shouted, "Unbelievable." Jennifer just stood there, looking at Newsom with an expression that wasn't angry. It was worse. It was disappointed, like she'd hoped for better and been proven wrong. Vance spoke quietly, deadly. "No one expects you to solve every individual problem personally, Governor. But we expect you not to walk past homeless people on your way to $300 dinners while claiming your working day and night to help them. We expect you not to spend $24 billion and make the problem worse. And we expect you to have enough self-awareness to understand why Jennifer standing here right now telling this story to 40 million Americans is devastating to your credibility." He turned to the camera, to the millions watching at home. This is what happens when politicians stop seeing people and start seeing political problems to be managed. Jennifer isn't a problem. She's a person, a teacher, someone who contributed to society for years, and the government she paid taxes to, the state she served, abandoned her, while the man running that state walked past her twice without a second thought. Newsom was shaking his head, his perfect hair slightly disheveled for the first time anyone could remember. "That's not fair." "Fair?" Vance's voice rose slightly. The first time all night he'd shown real emotion. "Jennifer sleeping in doorways for 3 years isn't fair. You spending enough money to buy her a house 10 times over and not helping her isn't fair. You walking past her while she's homeless, while you're literally responsible for solving homelessness. That's not fair. Don't talk to me about fair." And everyone watching knew that Gavin Newsom's carefully constructed political image had just shattered into pieces on live television. But that's not where the story ends. That's just where the public part of the story ends. What happened after that forum? After the cameras stopped rolling? After 40 million people had watched Jennifer confront the governor who'd walked past her twice? That's when things got really interesting. The clips started spreading before the forum even ended. Audience members had been recording on their phones. Vertical video, shaky camera work. But the content was devastating. By the time Newsom left the building, Jennifer's testimony had already been viewed 5 million times on Twitter. By midnight it was 20 million. By morning it was 40 million. The moment where Newsom said, "I can't be expected to solve every individual person's problem," was clipped, shared, memed, analyzed. His tone, his defensiveness, the look on Jennifer's face. It became the defining moment of the night, of his career, the kind of moment that follows you forever. Conservative media ran with it immediately. Gavin Newsom's "let them eat cake" moment was the headline everywhere. Fox News played the clip on loop. Talk radio dissected it endlessly. Right-wing Twitter had a field day. But it wasn't just conservative outlets. CNN's own panel looked shell-shocked. "I've covered politics for 20 years, one analyst said. "I've never seen anything like that." The Jennifer moment was devastating. The Atlantic ran a piece titled "When Progressive Rhetoric Collides with Reality." The New York Times editorial board wrote California's reckoning. Even MSNBC, typically friendly to Democrats, couldn't defend it. Newsom didn't have answers, one panelist admitted. "When you've spent $24 billion and made homelessness worse, what can you say?" The polls came quickly. Newsom's approval rating in California dropped 9 points in 4 days. Among Democrats nationally, he'd been positioning himself for a future presidential run. He dropped 15 points. But more devastating was the favorability collapse among his core supporters. Progressive activists, young voters, the people who'd believed in him. They felt betrayed. "We told him the programs weren't working," one homeless advocate told NPR. "We told him the money was being wasted. He didn't listen. He just wanted to spend billions and get credit for caring. He never actually wanted to solve the problem." The California recall movement, which had been struggling to gain traction, suddenly exploded. Within a week, they'd gathered 300,000 new signatures. Within 2 weeks, they had enough to trigger another recall election. Jennifer became a national figure overnight. Good Morning America, 60 Minutes, the Joe Rogan Experience. She told her story calmly, without embellishment. Didn't need to. The truth was damning enough. "I'm not angry at Governor Newsom personally," she told one interviewer. "I'm angry at a system that spent $24 billion and somehow none of it reached the people who needed it most. I'm angry that politicians can walk past human suffering on their way to luxury dinners and not see the disconnect." Vance's team connected her with private charities and community organizations, not government programs. Within 3 weeks, she had temporary housing. Within 6 weeks, she had a job helping other homeless people navigate the system. She became an advocate, speaking about what actually works versus what sounds good in press releases. "The money's there," she told audiences, $24 billion, "but it's trapped in a system designed to sustain itself, not to help people. We need to tear it down and start over. Focus on actually housing people, not on employing consultants and administrators." As for Newsom, he tried to recover, gave interviews defending his record, issued statements about misunderstandings and context, but he couldn't escape the video, couldn't escape Jennifer's face, couldn't escape his own words. His team went into crisis mode, conference calls at midnight, strategy sessions that lasted until dawn, polling, focus groups, trying to find a message that would work, trying to find a way to turn this around. But you can't message your way out of walking past a homeless woman on your way to a $300 dinner. You can't focus group test that. You can't spin it. The video exists. The testimony is on record, and 40 million people watched it happen live. By December, rumors spread that he wouldn't seek re-election. His team denied it, strongly, but major donors were pulling back. The whispers in Democratic circles got louder. He's finished. He's done. Start looking for the next generation. The recall election was set for March 2026. Early polls showed him losing by double digits. The man who'd seemed destined for the presidency was now fighting to survive as governor. And it all came down to one moment, one woman, one simple, devastating truth. He'd walked past a homeless teacher on his way to a $300 dinner, while spending billions supposedly to help people like her. You can survive policy disagreements. You can survive political attacks. You can survive bad press cycles. But you can't survive being exposed as fundamentally disconnected from the people you're supposed to serve. You can't survive having your hypocrisy laid bare in front of 40 million people by someone whose life your failures destroyed. Gavin Newsom learned that lesson the hardest way possible. In a forum, he'd agreed to thinking he'd defend his record. In front of cameras, he'd sought out thinking they'd showcase his leadership. Instead, they captured his political death. The moment when the perfect hair and the practiced talking points and the smooth delivery all proved worthless because he couldn't answer the simplest question. If you've had all this power and all this money, why are people like Jennifer still sleeping in doorways? He had no answer, and everyone watching knew it. That's how political careers end. Not with scandals or resignations, with viral moments and devastating silences, with truths that can't be spun away. Gavin Newsom had his moment of truth and it destroyed him. If you found this story compelling, if you want to see more in-depth political analysis that goes beyond the headlines and into the reality behind the rhetoric, make sure to subscribe to this channel. Hit that like button. Turn on notifications. Because the gap between what politicians say and what they actually do, that's the story that matters, and we're going to keep telling it.